Today is day 4 for the Come Follow Me study for this week, June 22nd to the 28th. Hear thou in heaven their prayer. 2 Samuel 11 through 12, 1 Kings 3 and 6 through 9 and 11. Thursday, June 25th, 2026, 1 Kings 6 through 7. 1 Kings 4. The officers and Solomon's court are listed. Upon his ascension to the throne, Solomon made the first of several administrative changes. He created 3 new offices in his cabinet. David had governed his new empire almost single-handedly, needing only a commanding general, a chief scribe, and a few secretaries. To this basic staff, Solomon added Ahishar, who was in charge of the palace. He would serve as prime minister, second only to Solomon in power. Adoniram was named the chief of forced labor, for Solomon had a tremendous building program in mind and no way to begin it without a steady supply of workers. Adoniram would supervise both foreign slave laborers, the descendants of those people who had survived the Israelite conquest, and a newly organized conscripted labor force of Israelites, who served 1 out of every 3 months. In addition, Azariah, the son of Nathan, was over the officers, provincial governors, of the 12 districts of Israel. Up to now, the government of Israel, even under Saul and David, had never been controlled by an administration as we know it, but rather by a patriarchal or charismatic leader who ruled largely by personal magnetism and inspiration from the Lord. Such leadership had been necessary to unite the 12 independent and often quarrelsome tribes during the military conquest of Canaan. But now Israel was at peace and her territory was greatly enlarged. A nation sorely needed a more efficient method of government. So Solomon divided Israel into 12 administrative districts, all comparatively equal in population and resources. To accommodate the new territory, the arbitrary divisions ignored the old tribal boundaries, and for all practical purposes the tribal distinctions were abandoned except for temple duties and genealogies. Solomon assigned 1 officer to head each district. All of them were responsible to Azariah. The 12 officers were in charge of raising provisions for the king's household. Each district supplied food for 1 month of every year. The officers in turn imposed the burden of providing food on the farmers and shepherds, and quite a burden it was. The provision needed for 1 day by Solomon's court was 30 cors, or 188 bushels of fine flour, and 60 cors, about 370 bushels of meal, 10 fat oxen, and 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides harts, gazelles, or fallow deer, roebucks, and fatted fowl. And those offices let nothing be lacking. Barley also and straw for the horses, and swift steeds they brought to the place where it was required, each according to his charge, and this was the part of the taxation. Such taxation fulfilled the words of the prophet Samuel, who many years before had warned Israel what would happen if they chose to have a king rule over them. Solomon reigns in peace and prosperity over a large kingdom. Solomon reigned over all the provinces from the river Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, even to the frontiers of Egypt. The Euphrates was on the east of Solomon's dominions. The Philistines were westward on the Mediterranean Sea, and Egypt was on the south. Solomon had therefore as tributaries the kingdoms of Assyria, Damascus, Moab, and Ammon, which lay between the Euphrates and the Mediterranean. Solomon's wisdom and understanding exceed that of all men. 1 Kings 5. Solomon solicits and gains Hiram's help in getting timber to build the temple. The Israelites hew stones and cut timber for the temple. In 1 Kings 6 through 7, you'll find a detailed description of the sacred house that Solomon built for the Lord. The details may not seem as important to you as they were to the ancient Israelites, but reading these chapters might give you a sense for how important it was to them to have a house of the Lord. Why is it important to you? You might ponder what the different parts of Solomon's temple might symbolize. Elder James E. Talmage said, soon after Solomon's ascension to the throne, he set about the labor of building a temple, which as heritage and honor had come to him with his crown. He laid the foundation in the 4th year of his reign, and the building was completed within 7 years and a half. With the great wealth accumulated by his kingly father, and specifically reserved for the building of the temple. Solomon was able to put the surrounding lands under tribute and to enlist the cooperation of nations in his great undertaking. The temple workmen numbered scores of thousands, and every department was in charge of master craftsmen. To serve on the great structure in any capacity was an honor, and labor acquired in dignity never before recognized. The erection of the Temple of Solomon was an epoch-making event, not alone in the history of Israel, but in that of the world. Like the tabernacle that the Israelites built in the wilderness, the Temple of Solomon was the house of the Lord. It was made of the finest materials. Regarding Solomon's temple, Elder James E. Talmage taught, in architecture and construction, in design and costliness, it is known as one of the most remarkable buildings in history. A comparison of the plan of Solomon's temple with that of the earlier tabernacle shows that in all essentials of arrangement and proportion, the two were so nearly alike as to be practically identical. True, the tabernacle had but one enclosure, while the temple was surrounded by courts, but the inner structure itself, the temple proper, closely followed the earlier design. The dimensions of the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and the porch were in the temple exactly double those of the corresponding parts in the tabernacle. The temple was long and narrow. According to the dimensions cited in the Bible, the temple was about 100 feet long and 30 feet wide. It stood on a platform about 9 feet high. The temple itself was about 45 feet high. The Salt Lake Temple is 186.5 feet long, 118.5 feet wide, and 210 feet high. The furniture of the temple was similar to, but not identical with that of the tabernacle. In the Holy of Holies stood the old Mosaic Ark with the mercy seat, but the cherubim overshowing the mercy seat were new. They were longer in size. Their wings touched in the middle and reached each wall of the Holy of Holies. They were also different in posture. In the holy place, all was new. The altar of incense was made of cedar wood overlaid with gold. Instead of one golden candlestick and one table of showbread, there were 10, 5 on each side. In the outer court stood the brazen altar of the same pattern as that of the tabernacle, but enormously larger. Although David received some revelation about the building of the temple, apparently Solomon received even more. President Brigham Young said, "The pattern of this temple, the length and breadth and height of the inner and outer courts, with all the fixtures thereunto appertaining, were given to Solomon by revelation, through the proper source." And why was this revelation pattern necessary? Because Solomon had never built a temple, and did not know what was necessary in the arrangement of the different apartments, any better than Moses did what was needed in the tabernacle. The temple of Solomon was later destroyed, and the kingdom of Judah was scattered. Zerubbabel's temple, which Herod renovated, was later built on the same spot. This later temple was the one standing in the Savior's day. Solomon builds the temple. 1 Kings 6:1-10. And it came to pass in the 418th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel in the Mount Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, the length thereof was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 20 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits. And the porch before the temple of the house, 20 cubits was the length thereof, according to the breadth of the house, and 10 cubits was the breadth thereof before the house. And for the house he made windows of narrow lights, or recessed and latticed windows. And against the wall of the house he built chambers round about, against the walls of the house round about, both of the temple and of the oracle, and he made chambers round about. The nethermost chamber was 5 cubits broad, and the middle was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For without in the wall of the house he made narrowed rests round about, that the beams should not be fastened in the walls of the house. And the house, when it was in building, was built of stone, made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was in building. The door of the middle chamber was in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out of the middle into the third. So he built the house and finished it, and covered the house with beams and boards of cedar. And then he built chambers against all the house, 5 cubits high, and they rested on the house with timber of cedar. The Lord promises to dwell among the Israelites if they are obedient. 1 Kings 6:11-13. And the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, concerning this house which thou art in building, if thou wilt walk in my statutes, and execute my judgments, and keep all my commandments to walk in them, then will I perform my word with thee, which I spake unto David thy father, and I will dwell among the children of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. The ornaments of the temple are described. 1 Kings 6:14-23. So Solomon built the house and finished it, and he built the walls of the house within with boards of cedar, both the floor of the house and the walls of the ceiling, and he covered them on the inside with wood, and covered the floor of the house with planks of fir. And he built 20 cubits on the sides of the house, both the floor and the walls, with boards of cedar. He even built them for it within, even for the oracle, or the innermost room of the temple of Solomon, the Holy of Holies, even for the most holy place. And the house, that is, the temple before it, was 40 cubits long. And the cedar of the house within was carved with knops and open flowers, all with cedar. There was no stone seen. And the oracle he prepared in the house within, to set there the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And the oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in the height thereof. And he overlaid it with pure gold, and he covered the altar which was of cedar. So Solomon overlaid the house within with pure gold, and he made a partition by the chains of gold before the oracle, and he overlaid it with gold. And the whole house he overlaid with gold until he had finished all the house. Also, the whole altar that was by the oracle he overlaid with gold. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high. Cherubim are figures representing heavenly creatures, the exact form being unknown. Cherubim have been called the guard. Cherubim have been called to guard sacred places. They are found in the Holy of Holies, on the mercy seat of the ark, and in the visions of Ezekiel. 1 Kings 6:24-35. And 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the uttermost part of the one wing unto the uttermost part of the other were 10 cubits. And the other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubims were of one measure and one size. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was it of the other cherub. And he set the cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he overlaid the cherubims with gold. And he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubims, and palm trees and open flowers within and without. And the floor of the house he overlaid with gold within and without. And for the entering of the oracle he made doors of olive tree. The lintel and side posts were a 5th part of the wall. The 2 doors also were of olive tree, and he carved upon them carvings of cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold, and spread gold upon the cherubims and upon the palm trees. So also made he for the door of the temple posts of olive tree, a 4th part of the wall. And the 2 doors were of fir tree. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold, fitted upon the carved work. Consider what the cherubim, trees, and flowers in 1 Kings 6:35 might represent. 1 Kings 6:36-38. And he built the inner court with 3 rows of hewed stone, and a row of cedar beams. In the 4th year was the foundation of the house of the Lord laid, in the month Ziph. And in the 11th year, in the month Bul, which is the 8th month, was the house finished throughout all parts thereof, and according to all the fashion of it. So was he 7 years in building it. The month of Bul corresponds approximately with the month of November. As this is the 8th month and the temple was begun in the 2nd, the time actually occupied in its construction was, in strictness, 7.5 years. 1 Kings 7. Solomon builds himself a house. Although the temple was built in response to the Lord's will, had a valid religious motivation, and was a great spiritual value to Israel, Solomon's palace and luxurious court seem to have resulted from other motivations. One thinks of King Noah's elaborate building projects recorded in the Book of Mormon. It took an additional 13 years to build Solomon's palace. Solomon's palace consisted of several buildings connected together, namely, 1, the house of the forest of Lebanon, 2, the pillar hall with the porch, 3, the throne room and judgment hall, 4, the king's dwelling house and the house of Pharaoh's daughter. The description of the several portions of this palace is so very brief that it is impossible to form a distinct idea of its character. The different divisions are given in verses 1 through 8 in their natural order, commencing at the back and terminating with the front. 1 Kings 7, 1 through 12. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon. The length thereof was 100 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits, upon 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams upon the pillars. And it was covered with cedar above upon the beams, that lay on 45 pillars, 15 in a row. And there were windows in 3 rows, and light was against light, in 3 ranks. And all the doors and posts were square with the windows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. And he made a porch of pillars. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth thereof 30 cubits, and the porch was before them. And the other pillars and the thick beam were before them. Then he made a porch for the throne, where he might judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar, from one side of the floor to the other. And his house, where he dwelt, had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also an house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto this porch. All these were of costly stones, according to the measures of hewed stones, sawed with saws, within and without, even from the foundation unto the coping, and so on the outside toward the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits, and stones of 8 cubits. And above were costly stones, after the measures of hewed stones and cedars. And the great court round about was with 3 rows of hewed stones, and a row of cedar beams, both for the inner court of the house of the Lord, and for the porch of the house. Hiram of Tyre makes the 2 pillars, the molten sea, the 10 bases, the 10 lavers, and all the vessels for the temple. 1 Kings 7, 13 through 16. And King Solomon went and fetched Hiram out of Tyre. He was a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass. And he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning to work all works in brass. And he came to King Solomon and wrought all his work. For he cast 2 pillars of brass, of 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about. And he made 2 chapiters, or the decorative carved head of a pillar, of molten brass, to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one chapiter was 5 cubits, and the height of the other chapiter was 5 cubits. A chapiter is an ornament or decoration at the top of a column or pillar. 1 Kings 7, 17 through 21. And nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the chapiters which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for the one chapiter, and 7 for the other chapiter. And he made the pillars and 2 rows round about upon the one network, to cover the chapiters that were upon the top, with pomegranates, and so did he for the other chapiter. And the chapiters that were upon the top of the pillars were of lily work in the porch, 4 cubits. And the chapiters upon the 2 pillars had pomegranates also above, over against the belly which was by the artwork. And the pomegranates were 200 in rows round about upon the other chapiter. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar, and called the name thereof Jachin. And he set upon the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. 2 large freestanding bronze pillars stood on either side of the entrance to the temple. The pillar on the right was inscribed with the name Jachin, which can mean he will establish or he establishes. The pillar on the left was inscribed with the name Boaz, which can mean by his strength or in his strength. Those pillars may have represented a gate through which one passes from an earthly to a holy place. 1 Kings 7:22. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work, so was the work of the pillars finished. The molten sea, or baptismal font, rests on the back of 12 oxen. 1 Kings 7:23-26. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and its height was 5 cubits. And a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. And under the brim of it round about there were knops compassing it, 10 and a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast in 2 rows when it was cast. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was an handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers and lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. Bible scholars have generally been confused concerning the use of the huge molten sea of brass. Modern revelation assists the student today to understand its purpose. Elder Brewster McConkie explained in Solomon's temple a large molten sea of brass was placed on the backs of 12 brazen oxen, these oxen being symbolical of the 12 tribes of Israel. This brazen sea was used for performing baptisms for the living. There were no baptisms for the dead until after the resurrection of Christ. It must be remembered that all direct and plain references to baptism have been deleted from the Old Testament, and that the word baptism is of Greek origin. Some equivalent words, such as wash, would have been used by the Hebrew peoples. In describing the molten sea, the Old Testament record says, "The sea was for the priests to wash in." This is tantamount to saying that the priests perform baptisms in it. In this temple building dispensation, the brethren have been led by the spirit of inspiration to pattern the baptismal fonts placed in temples after the one in Solomon's temple. 1 Kings 7:27-51. And he made 10 bases of brass, 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height of it. And the work of the bases was on this manner. They had borders, and the borders were between the ledges. And on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above. And beneath the lions and oxen were certain additions made of thin work. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and plates of brass, and the 4 corners thereof had undersetters. Under the laver were undersetters molten at the side of every addition. And the mouth of it within the chapiter and above was a cubit, but the mouth thereof was round after the work of the base, a cubit and a half, and also upon the mouth of it were gravings, with their borders 80, not round. And under the borders were 4 wheels, and the axletrees of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and half a cubit. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axletrees and their naves and their felloes and their spokes were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters to the 4 corners of one base, and the undersetters were of the very base itself. And in the top of the base was there a round compass of half a cubit high, and on the top of the base the ledges thereof and the borders thereof were of the same. For on the plates of the ledges thereof and on the borders thereof he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees according to the proportion of every one, and additions round about. After this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, and 1 side. Then made he 10 lavers, or washbins, of brass. 1 laver contained 40 baths, and every laver was 4 cubits, and upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house, and 5 on the left side of the house, And he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward over against the south. And Hiram made the lavers or washbins and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he made King Solomon for the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters, which were upon the top of the pillars, and 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, even 2 rows of pomegranates for 1 network to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were upon the pillars, and the 10 bases and 10 lavers on the bases, and 1 sea and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots and the shovels and the basins, and all these vessels which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of the Lord were of bright brass. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarthan. And Solomon left all the vessels unweighted, because they were exceeding many, neither was the weight of the brass found out. And Solomon made all the vessels that pertained unto the house of the Lord, the altar of gold, and the table of gold, whereupon the showbread was, and the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side, and 5 on the left, before the oracle with the flowers and the lamps and the tongues of gold, and the bowls and the snippers and the basins and the spoons, and the censers of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house, to wit, of the temple. So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord. And Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, even the silver, and the gold, and the vessels, did he put among the treasures of the house of the Lord.